let's talk infidelity. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I want to dive into infidelity. This was actually a requested video. I mentioned infidelity in a previous video recently, and I had a lot of people that wanted me to do a deep dive into infidelity. Now, a lot of these topics I've actually talked about in other videos. A lot of these things I feel like I talked about in some of my film breakdowns, and a lot of those things kind of had topics that were just kind of all over the place. So some of these things are things I talked about in previous videos, but I wanted to kind of create a video that I could direct people to that was kind of like a just specifically on this topic. A few things before I get started. A lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about when it comes to infidelity is actually based on some of the works of Esther Perel. So I'm going to give her a shout out. I've actually read her book, Mating in Captivity, and I've actually seen some of her talks about infidelity. Now, I will say I don't blindly agree with everything that she says about the topic of infidelity. I think she tends to be a lot more forgiving and understanding about the concept of infidelity than I am. I have much less of a tolerance for it. But she is someone who has studied it extensively, so I'm probably going to be referencing a lot of her research in this video. So I'm going to be taking a lot of cues from things that I have, learned from her content, and also other experts who've studied things like psychology and relationship dynamics and things like that. So I'm not really just pulling a lot of these topics just sort of like randomly out of thin air. I'm also going to reference some celebrity couples in this video, particularly Tom and Gisele, because I think that they are kind of the hot topic when it comes to infidelity right now. So I just want to state before I get started that when I talk about celebrity couples or celebrity relationships, I am only basing this based on their public personas. I don't know what any of these people are like behind closed doors. I don't know what any celebrities are like when the cameras are off. I am just solely basing this on celebrities' public personas and what we see publicly and what they share with us publicly. So I think there's some lessons we can learn from celebrities' public personas, but again, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. So I just want to make that very clear as a disclaimer before we get started. So I feel like the subject of infidelity, particularly female infidelity, has been coming up a lot in the media lately with the whole Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen relationship. I have a video. I did a analysis of the Tom and Gisele relationship. This was actually when they sort of first announced their split. So her infidelity wasn't really a topic because that wasn't something that was public information at that point when I made that video. So if you want to look into my thoughts on the Tom and Gisele split, you can go back and watch that video. People were kind of divided about their opinions on that video, especially because in that video, like, I'll be honest, and I'm probably completely biased in the situation. I'm team Tom Brady in this situation. I'm from New England. He's like a larger than life person here, and frankly, I definitely did side with him more in this situation. I still do in general. I've never cared for Gisele at all. Not that I wish bad things on her or anything like that, but I don't really care for Gisele, so I'm not making this video to bash Brady and to defend Gisele. I'm clearly biased, but at the end of the day, I want to approach this from as much of an unbiased position as I possibly can. So if you want to get into the dynamics of like their split and, go back to that other video and watch that before you decide to comment about stuff about like, oh, was he there? Was he not there? Whatever, all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to get into that here. I'm simply going to talk a little bit about Gisele coming forward and announcing that she had been having an affair with her like personal trainer, martial arts instructor, whatever, while she was still with Brady. I do think it's kind of interesting that when they first announced their split, she really threw Brady under the bus, made it sound like it was all his fault because he just wouldn't retire, and that she had sacrificed so much of her life just to be there for her kids and had put her career on hold just to be there for him, and kind of made him look like the bad guy, and actually had like a lot of women in the world basically like vilifying him and making him look like he was the horrible person in that situation. I don't want to dive into this too much because I went into this a little bit more in the other video, but personally I think that was an exaggeration on her part. A lot of reasons why I think that is, but I do find it ironic that when the split happened, she painted him as the villain, and now she's come forward and said, hey, I was having an affair with this guy for so long. First of all, she didn't have to do that. Like, supposedly she's involved with this guy now, but she could have just played it off like she wasn't involved with him until after their split, and nobody really would have been the wiser. I mean, unless, I suppose, maybe if he was gonna come forward, which I don't know why she would still be with him if he was blackmailing her. I don't know. It seems like she came out and said that because she wanted to humiliate Tom, and it seems strange to me that she would actually come out and admit that publicly, but clearly she had kind of already painted him as being the bad guy in that relationship. So her coming out and saying this, I mean, there are a lot of guys who are going to vilify her, but there were a lot of guys who were vilifying her for leaving anyway, and a lot of women who were vilifying him for like not being there for the family, as she said he wasn't. We don't know if he really was or not, but like she was claiming he wasn't really there for the family. He was just focused on career. And a lot of women already think he was the bad guy, so a lot of women are like, well, yeah, she started having an affair because, you know, he was the bad guy or whatever. So technically her coming forward with the infidelity didn't really change people's opinions, I don't think, that much of the situation, because you either thought that he was the victim of her, or you thought that he was the villain in the situation, and her being unfaithful didn't really change most people's perceptions of them and their relationship. I still think it was kind of unnecessary for her to come forward and make this statement and tell everybody about this, because it's something that could have easily just, you know, not been talked about and nobody needed to know. I don't really know specifically what her motivation was, except maybe to humiliate him even more. But then of course, then they had the roast of Tom Brady, and then a lot of the roast was basically roasting Gisele for cheating on him and having the affair. And I want to touch on a few things, because I'm seeing a lot of, particularly men, taking this situation of the Tom and Gisele situation and making it about them. I mean, there's a lot of women that make it about them, and you know, it's just very common for us to take celebrity relationships and kind of like make it about us, or like project our stuff onto them, or to use those situations to explain our situations. Like, I think that's a basic human nature thing. But I'm seeing a lot of guys like, well, if Tom Brady can't even keep a woman faithful, then what chance do I have? And I don't want men to get stuck in that mentality. There's a lot of guys, I get it, that are like, Tom Brady, greatest football player of all time, and I'm with you, I get that. And like, if he can't even keep a woman faithful, then what are the chances that I'm gonna have? Well, bear in mind, Tom Brady was in a relationship with a woman who at one point in time was the highest paid supermodel in the world. And Gisele's net worth has always exceeded Brady's net worth. She's always made more money. And Gisele was famous, again, for being the top supermodel, but also for being in a relationship with Leonardo DiCaprio. I don't know if she was the first, but she was the first high-profile relationship that Leonardo DiCaprio was in, where he dumped her when she turned 25. And I don't think people at the time realized the pattern at that point, because it was still so new, but they were a very high-profile public relationship. Leonardo DiCaprio, considered one of the greatest actors of all time. He's a movie star. I mean, would I take Tom Brady over Leonardo DiCaprio? Yeah, of course I would. But like, in celebrity hierarchy, and I talked a little bit about celebrity hierarchy when it came to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, but in celebrity hierarchy, it's musicians, it's movie stars, TV stars, supermodels are kind of in that range, and then there's athletes, and then I'd say maybe like broadcasters or things like that. Leonardo DiCaprio, as far as celebrity hierarchy goes, is one of the top actors. So he outranks Brady in celebrity hierarchy. Gisele, being one of the highest paid supermodels of all time, she outranked Brady in celebrity. Is Brady incredibly accomplished? Yes. Does Brady have a lot of great things going for him? Absolutely. But in celebrity hierarchy land, you can look at Tom Brady and be like, that's Tom Brady. But like, to Gisele, he was never Tom Brady, right? Like, he never outranked her as far as celebrity goes. In the sports world, absolutely, but not as far as celebrity goes. I think there's a lot of guys who are like, hey, like, if I was Tom Brady, I would have everything in my life would be perfect. Well, nobody has everything perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. That's just not the way it works. So it's not a matter of like, okay, well, if I was Tom Brady, all my problems would be solved. But Tom Brady wasn't exactly dating like a regular person. You know what I mean? Like, he was dating one of the formerly the highest paid supermodels in the world, whose net worth always exceeded his. Now again, this isn't just about money, but I do think that celebrity status and money and finances and stuff do have a factor in this situation. I'm not using any of this as a justification for cheating. I'm simply explaining the dynamic that they have together. Now, statistics actually show that if a woman earns more money than a man, that the man is much more likely to cheat. We don't know anything about Brady's infidelity. That hasn't come out. We don't know if he was, we don't know if he wasn't. No information about that. So right now I'm going to assume that he wasn't, although, you know, pro athletes are not really known for being faithful, but there's been no evidence at this point in time, at least as filming this video, whether he was or he wasn't. So we don't know. We just know that Gisele has confessed to essentially being unfaithful. One of the problems that I see with men who are saying things like, well, if Tom Brady can't even keep a woman faithful, then what are the chances of any man having a woman be faithful? These men are judging Brady based on his career success. Probably also on his looks, but you know, for men, looks are not necessarily as relevant. Like, attractiveness in men is not really, I mean, you might attract more women being attractive as a man, but it's not going to keep a woman. Like, attractiveness is a nice to have in men, but it's not necessarily a determining factor in most things when it comes to relationships and relationship stability. Most men are judging Tom Brady based on his career accomplishments, which are incredibly impressive. I'm from New England. I would never, ever knock Brady's career accomplishments. That said, his career accomplishments do not determine how healthy his home life is. Now, I'm not somebody who's going to say that you can't have a healthy home life and have career accomplishments at the same time. You can. And there is also the possibility that somebody that does have a lot of career success might not be focusing enough on the home life, which is something that Gisele has implied. Now, we don't really know to what extent that really was, but I think oftentimes what I'm seeing is men mistaking Brady's career success, which is undeniable, with his personal life and how that should be succeeding as well. And those are not a guarantee. Like, it's not guaranteed that because a man is accomplished in his career that he's automatically going to be accomplished in his home. Now, I'm not putting all that on Brady by any means, or saying that, you know, it was all his responsibility or anything like that. I just want people to be aware. I think there's a lot of men who are like, well, I see this man having this kind of career success. He has this, you know, maybe he's, you know, maybe not even just in football, but maybe he has like a really successful business or something, and or he's successful in some area in his work life, but he just can't maintain relationships. Well, yes, a man who is very successful and accomplished in life and in work is probably more likely to be able to attract a partner, for sure. It doesn't guarantee that he's going to have a healthy relationship. And again, I'm not using this to justify Gisele's infidelity, but I am pointing out that we can't just make the assumption that because a man has career success that automatically his home life is going to be good as well, or automatically a woman is going to be happy and fulfilled and his family is going to be happy and healthy just because he has career success. Not knocking career success, I think that's really important. I think it's important for most men to feel successful and accomplished in their careers. However, it's not going to guarantee you a successful, happy home life. Not justifying infidelity or anything like that. I'm just saying it's something to be aware of, right? That while Brady's career success is absolutely undeniably impressive for anybody, it doesn't guarantee you a happy home life. Doesn't mean you can't have a happy home life. I know there are going to be people out there that are going to say, oh, a man can't have both because if a man's focused on career, he's going to be slacking off at home. I don't think that's necessarily a guarantee. However, that can be a factor and it can be something that happens. Not justifying the infidelity, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, but I do think it's something to be aware of, that because you admire Tom Brady as a man and as an athlete and as a player, that doesn't automatically mean that his family life is going to be happy and healthy and stable. We need to be careful of confusing the two. Now, one thing that I don't think I emphasized in the last video that I did about Tom and Gisele, but that I kind of want to analyze because I think this is really important, and this goes into masculine and feminine dynamics. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine and feminine dynamics, I have a lot of videos talking about that, so I'm not going to get into that in this video specifically. You can look up some of my other videos. But most relationships are going to work the best when you have a masculine partner and a feminine partner. And most men are going to be very masculine at their core and most women are going to be very feminine at their core. So ideally, when we're talking about a heterosexual relationship, the healthiest place to be in is going to be a man and his masculine and a woman and her feminine. Doesn't mean that some of those energies aren't going to shift and there aren't going to be moments when you both have to be masculine or you both have to be feminine, or you might have to, you know, she might have to be more masculine and a man might have to be more feminine. Doesn't mean that those things can't shift and change over time, but generally speaking, ideally a partnership works when you have a masculine core man who can primarily be in his masculine and a feminine core woman who can primarily be in her feminine. Those are typically going to be the healthiest dynamics. Tom Brady, as a football player and in his professional life, I read Tom Brady's like TB12 book and stuff, so I've learned a little bit about his brand and his message. I followed his career. I remember watching him like his first season when he took over for Bledsoe. Like, I know I've been a Brady fan since the beginning. As a football player, Tom Brady is very masculine. He's very focused. He's very disciplined. He's very directional. He's an incredible leader. Tom Brady as an athlete, as a retired athlete now, I think he's a really amazing example of healthy masculine energy. I think he comes across like a great leader. He seems like he's a team player, but also able to take the lead. He comes across like somebody who I would consider to be a really great male role model. The messages I've seen him do in interviews, you know, for young boys or for newer athletes or things like that, I think he comes across like a great role model in his professional life. So in his professional life, he comes across very masculine. He's very focused. He has a very distinct passion and purpose. He embodies a lot of very healthy masculine energy in his professional life, at least publicly. However, if you really look at Gisele, the interviews that Gisele has done about her relationship, about her marriage, the way that Gisele has presented herself, Gisele comes across very masculine. She comes across like she's the one in charge. She's taken over interviews where she has, I believe, in a lot of interviews, even when they were together, she's said a lot of things that really did cross a line as far as like sharing some of Brady's personal medical information. She has always come across, at least the way she's presented herself, as being like she wears the pants in their relationship and in their marriage. Now again, I don't know their personal life. I'm just going by what she seems to be presenting to the world, is that she's come across like a very masculine woman as far as the way that she runs things. I'm pretty sure she's even kind of said that she kind of like runs the household and manages the household, which again, that kind of like micromanagement of things tends to be very masculine. It's very common nowadays with women, but it tends to be very masculine. So if you have Brady, who in his career life is a very masculine man, he's a leader, and he's coming home to a very masculine woman because she's feeling like she needs to lead the household. In order for that to work in a household, Brady is probably gonna have to embody more of his feminine energy in the household. Now, maybe Gisele is embodying more of her masculine energy in the household because when Brady comes home, he's in more of his feminine energy. Like, I'm not necessarily saying that either of these situations is either one of their fault. I don't really know because I don't really know their actual dynamic at home. However, Brady does appear like in his work life to be very masculine, as if he's a very masculine core man. Now, if he's coming home and he is either, maybe he's choosing to be in more of his feminine energy, so she's has to enact her masculine energy, which is going to create a very sort of like mother-son dynamic, or if she's just very masculine, so when he comes home, he feels like he has to be in more of his feminine energy, which again is going to create more of a mother-son dynamic. That's going to throw off the polarity in a relationship because you're not going to have two people that are probably embodying their natural core energies, and you're probably going to end up losing sexual attraction for each other. Again, I'm going to get into infidelity in a minute, but say Gisele has a personal trainer. He's a martial arts trainer. I'm not saying everybody that does martial arts is automatically masculine, but martial arts is actually a really amazing way for men to connect with their masculine energy. It does help them embody a lot of masculine energy. So if Gisele is feeling like she's very much in her masculine when she's, you know, in her home life and stuff, and she's got a husband who, when he comes home, is very much in his feminine energy when he comes home, for whatever reason, because he feels like he has to or because he's choosing to, we don't know. Finding a man who maybe is in martial arts or something that can out-masculine her and possibly even, I don't want to say force, but maybe allow her, or he may be able to convince her, I don't know, like I don't really know the dynamic, and give her that sense of like, okay, I'm gonna let him be in his masculine. You could see where that would have an attraction. Now, I'm not using this to justify anything, and I'm going to get into that in a minute, but you can kind of see where that would start an attraction. It's not about one person's accomplishments or another person's accomplishments. It becomes just an energetic thing. Now, again, I don't know their personal life, so this is all just speculation, but like looking at it like zoomed out on the surface, it kind of does make a certain amount of sense why Gisele would then be attracted to somebody who was maybe a trainer. He's also somebody who, you know, was hired by her, so that also could put her in a power dynamic, so maybe she is more in her masculine at that point. He's also somebody who's probably more available to her, is catering more to her. That can be an appeal. Like, again, this is not a justification, it's just simply an explanation for this. You can see why she might then decide that this man might be more appealing to her than Tom Brady, who many people put up on a pedestal, but she may not have him up on a pedestal, right? I don't really think it's a healthy dynamic to be putting your husband up on a pedestal, to be honest with you, which I know is probably controversial to some people, but I don't really think it's a healthy dynamic. That's a whole other situation, right? But like, people I think are forgetting when people are like, oh, but it's Tom Brady. Like, as a culture, and especially if you're a football fan, especially if you're someone from New England or something, like, it's easy to put Tom Brady up on a pedestal, but that may not be his home life dynamic, right? And I'm not using any of this as a justification for infidelity, which I'm gonna get into in a minute. It's simply an explanation for like how people may get to this place. I also find it very interesting that, and this is probably because of the kind of men that are pointing out this stuff about Brady and the infidelity and stuff, is there's a lot of guys who are like, how could anybody ever cheat on Tom Brady? Like, if Tom Brady can't keep a woman, then like, what are my chances? If you look at all the women in the world, like some of the most beautiful, stunning, like icons of sexuality that we have for women in the world. I mean, I'm gonna think of older references. I'm sure there are younger references, but I'm thinking of older references of like Elizabeth Hurley, Christy Brinkley, Halle Berry, like women who have been put up on the pedestal as being the most beautiful, the most iconic, the sexiest women who men fantasize about. They've all been cheated on. And it's amazing how many men will jump to, well, maybe she wasn't putting out, or maybe she was cold, or maybe she wouldn't let the man lead, or maybe she wasn't a good wife, or like they'll all make the excuses. But yet when someone like Tom Brady gets cheated on, they automatically go to, well, it must be something wrong with the woman. It's funny how in any case of infidelity, whether it be the man who cheats or the woman who cheats, men always think it's the fault of the woman. I'm a firm believer. There might be some people who disagree with this, but I am a very, very firm believer. This is the hill I will die on. That when it comes to infidelity, it is always 1000% the fault of the person who cheats. It's the fault of the person who steps outside of the relationship. 1000% their fault. It's their responsibility. They're the ones who made the mistake. I know it can be easy to blame the person that they have the affair with. And I'm not saying that, you know, if they did know that they were actually sleeping with somebody who was in a relationship or something, that they're necessarily completely off the hook. But I really don't believe in putting the responsibility on the other person. I think it's always on the person who is in the relationship who cheats. Because at the end of the day, like, it's not anybody else's responsibility to maintain the fidelity of your relationship other than the people who are in the relationship. I don't really like projecting the blame on the other person. You also don't know what the other person really knew. You don't know what the person who cheated was telling the person they cheated with. You don't know how much information that they had. Some of them may have had information, some of them may have not. We don't really know. I also want to point out, because I'm sure I'm going to get some people who are going to comment this. People are going to be like, what about polyamory? What about open relationships? Whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm specifically talking about infidelity. So I'm talking about people who are in a committed monogamous relationship who choose to step out of that relationship. Or I guess you don't even necessarily have to be in a committed monogamous relationship, but like, I'm talking about anybody who steps outside of the boundaries of the relationship that you have set. So if you're in like an open relationship or polyamorous relationship where you are allowed to sleep with other people, that's not cheating. That's not infidelity, right? Like and I'm not really encouraging that. I don't necessarily think that that's a healthy thing. I'm not trying to encourage that lifestyle. However, that's a different situation. I'm literally talking about infidelity. Like, when you are in a relationship and you've set certain boundaries in the relationship and one person intentionally crosses those boundaries and, you know, whatever those are, typically it would be sleeping with somebody else, but obviously there's various boundaries. Like, anytime you step outside of the boundaries that you have created around fidelity in your relationship, I'm talking specifically about cheating. Again, I'm a firm believer that it is always like 1000% the responsibility of the person in the relationship that chooses to step out of the relationship and commit the infidelity that is at fault. Now, the health of your relationship is on both people. Like, it takes two people to make a healthy relationship. And a healthy relationship typically is going to be less likely to experience infidelity. Not 100% of the time, but typically is less likely to experience infidelity. And the health of the relationship is on two people. So, you know, you might have people that are gonna come up with an argument like, well, Brady was never around, Brady was always working, he was never home. I still do not believe that was a justification for Gisele stepping out. Even with my explanation of like the polarities being off and maybe Brady wasn't stepping into his masculine energy when he came home or things like that, or she was more in her masculine, whatever, like that's an explanation situation, but it is not an excuse. I still stand by the fact that anybody that steps outside of a relationship, it is on them. In the same way that if a man cheats on his wife, I still believe it's 100% his responsibility. Because no matter how bad a relationship gets, cheating is always a choice. Like, it's a choice to respond to a relationship. So people can come up with excuses like, oh, this person didn't want to sleep with me, or this person was never around, or you can come up with a million excuses. However, you always have a choice in a relationship to deal with the situation in a certain way. And if you choose to deal with the situation by stepping outside of the relationship, you've made that choice. And you need to take accountability for it. Full disclosure, for me, I have a zero tolerance policy about infidelity. I do not tolerate it. I don't stay in the relationship. I don't say, well, let's work things out, or will it happen this time? We'll see if it happens again. Zero tolerance policy for it. Don't put up with it. I really do believe that infidelity hasn't really been a pattern for me in relationships. I mean, I've never cheated, but I haven't really had a pattern of men cheating very much. Not to say that it's never happened, but like, it's not been a common pattern. You know, in my younger years, I think there were boundaries that got crossed in certain situations, but like, it's not something that's been an overall pattern for me. And I really do believe that the reason for that is because I just have a zero tolerance policy for it. So I'm just very upfront. Like, if you're gonna cheat, if you're gonna be with somebody else, it's the end of our relationship, plain and simple. If you want there to be an end to our relationship, that's fine. But if you are gonna step out, it's gonna end our relationship, plain and simple. And to be honest, I've proven that to myself at times, because there have been times in the past where guys have crossed lines when it came to fidelity. Not necessarily like actually going to bed with another woman, but they've crossed lines as far as their interactions with other women, and I've simply ended things. It hasn't come up a lot, but I really do believe that because I just put that out there in the world and I just have that energy about me where I just won't tolerate it, it just hasn't been something that's come up very often for me. And because I've proven to myself that I will stand by that boundary, I will stand by that decision, I have a lot less of a fear of it, because I simply just know that I know where I stand on that issue. I do feel like for some people who are finding this to be a common pattern with them, oftentimes it's because they haven't really settled within themselves like how they feel about it, or they are giving off the energy that they would tolerate it. Now again, I don't use this as a justification for it, because again, I still 1000% believe that it's the person who cheats that is responsible for the infidelity. However, I do think it's safe to ask yourself, like, if you do find yourself consistently being in that situation, am I really grounded in where my boundaries are? And am I really rooted in faith in myself that I can walk away if somebody crosses that boundary and stuff like that? I just think it's a fair thing to look at within yourself. And also too, and this goes back to the root of like men who are like, how could a woman ever cheat on Tom Brady? Or if like Tom Brady can get cheated on, then any man could get cheated on. When it's like, we know some of the most iconic, beautiful, like, you know, put up on a pedestal women also get cheated on. I think the lesson that we should really be taking from this is that if somebody is choosing to cheat, it's not really a reflection of us. It's a reflection of the person who cheats. I get a lot of comments on this when I talked about Jay-Z and Beyonce and like Jay-Z's cheating. People will think that I'm like if I say like, you know, Beyonce not being Jay-Z's dream girl, which was a video that went viral on TikTok, that like I'm blaming Beyonce for Jay-Z's behavior or something like that. That's something that I think I get comments on. Again, like I said, I always believe it is 100% the responsibility of the person who cheats. I don't believe that the person who gets cheated on has any responsibility in that situation, because the person who cheats has always made that choice. That said, I think oftentimes it is important to look at the dynamic of the relationship, because I think that can help you determine whether or not you have a healthy relationship or whether you don't. But again, I don't justify cheating, and I don't ever think it is the person who gets cheated on's fault that they get cheated on. The health of the relationship is on both people, but the person who cheats is always making a choice. Now, before I dive into this, if you are dealing with somebody in a relationship who is a narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, anybody in that range of personality types, and I have another video, it's actually my video talking about like porn addiction and stuff, that dives into this a little bit deeper. But when you have someone with that kind of category of personality types, they will cheat simply because they don't humanize people. They only look for the gratification they can get from someone. So they're never really going to be faithful to you, because they aren't really concerned with you or your well-being. They don't have the ability to have empathy for you. So your feelings about the relationship or anything, or your feelings or how your feelings are going to be affected by their actions, are not going to even enter into their head. So they're going to cheat simply because they have the opportunity to. Like it's irrelevant to how they feel about you. They're only interested in their own gratification. If you are dealing with somebody who has one of those personality types, my heart goes out to you, because I realize it can be very difficult. As somebody who has experienced narcissistic abuse before, I can tell you it's a challenge. It's a hard road to deal with. And I realize, you know, I know it's very easy to say like leave, and I would encourage you to take the steps to get out if you can, but I also know it's not always that simple. If you are in that situation, please understand that that person is probably going to cheat because they just don't have any empathy for you. They don't humanize people, and they're only looking for their short-term gratification, or like they're looking to get their needs met, and they don't really care about anybody else. So that infidelity is happening solely because of that. So that is kind of its own category within itself when we're talking about infidelity. We're talking about infidelity of somebody who is not in that category, like somebody who's capable of having empathy and things like that. There's different reasons why a person like that can cheat, and I think that the stereotypical excuse for why that happens, again, barring people who just lack empathy, barring people with those kind of personality types, but just for regular people, the stereotypical excuse that we, I think, as a society think is the reason why people cheat is that like men are just simply deprived of sex, and they're looking for sex. They're not getting enough sex from their partner, so they go out to try to find it somewhere else. And that women oftentimes are lacking emotional connection from their partners, and they end up usually in like an emotional relationship that can sometimes get physical because they're lacking something in their relationship. That can happen. I don't think it's an excuse, and I'm not making an excuse. However, that can happen. Sometimes men are just simply craving physical intimacy that they're not getting from their partner, and women are often craving emotional intimacy that they're not getting from their partner, and they end up starting to look for that in other people. Not healthy, not acceptable, not right, but that is a reason why it happens. It's not the only reason why that happens though. And I think oftentimes when people talk about infidelity, people assume that that's the only reason. There's also, and this is something that Esther Perel has talked about in some of her content and things like that, and I think this is actually a lot more common than people think. There's a lot of other reasons why people are going to be unfaithful. It's usually a response to something. Now, maybe it's a response to lacking some kind of intimacy in a relationship, or that there's something in a relationship that is lacking. And I would always encourage you, if you are in a relationship with somebody, in a committed relationship, and you do feel like something is lacking, try to figure out how you can work on that in your relationship, because stepping outside of your relationship is not going to make that better. So working on whatever is lacking in your relationship is usually the best way to do that. I'm not saying it's easy all the time, depending on what your situation is, but that's usually the best way to go, okay? However, there are people who are lacking something in their life, and it may not even be in their relationship. You see this oftentimes with men who lack direction and focus in their careers, and they end up stepping outside their marriage or their relationship because they're simply lost and they're looking for something, and they decide to try to find that in somebody else. And it may not have anything to do with the person that you're in the relationship with, or with your relationship at all. Women can often find that too sometimes if they feel lost. I think it was actually Esther Perel told a story about this woman who had just always felt like she was the good girl. She always felt like she was just the good girl and did everything correct, and she loved her husband and she loved her family, but she was just so exhausted from always doing everything right and always being perfect and always having to be like the good girl and the good wife, and she ended up having an affair, and it tore up her life, right? I don't encourage you to get to that point. But again, that had nothing to do with her family. It had nothing to do with her husband. It simply had to do with the fact that there was something in her life that was missing. And she went to another person in order to try to fulfill that, which usually is going to end up being a completely unfulfilled reaction. But it's a similar reason why somebody might turn to some other kind of addiction or something like that. It's searching for something outside of yourself or outside of the relationship that you're probably never going to find in that situation. You're really better off kind of looking within yourself. And there's also like other ways or healthier ways that you can actually try to find something in your life. Maybe you need a new career change, or maybe you need to pick up a new hobby, or a hobby that doesn't involve sleeping with somebody else. Maybe there's something in your life, like it's important to look at those those things, but just running to something that's going to destroy your relationship is probably not the healthiest way to go. But unfortunately, that is something that people are doing nowadays, and that doesn't reflect anything on the person in the relationship. I would also point out that this is something that doesn't get talked about enough, is that there are a lot of people who are really big on self-sabotage, and for them, cheating ends up being kind of, I would say, more of a trauma response. I think this is actually a lot more common. I think it happens more in men, but I do think it does happen in women, where if somebody is afraid of intimacy, they may actually want to be in a relationship. They may have a good relationship. Things might be really great for them. But if you don't feel worthy of being in a good relationship, a healthy relationship, or you're not comfortable with being in that relationship, or you feel like you're gonna screw it up or something, like if you are not comfortable with being in a relationship, oftentimes you might jump to something like cheating as a way to sabotage the relationship so that you don't have to be in it anymore. People can often use things like infidelity as self-sabotage, which is incredibly sad and painful. It's not an excuse by any means, but it is something I think that people are doing a lot more often. And again, that doesn't reflect anything on your partner. It's a trauma response that you have in yourself that is leading you to do that. And I think oftentimes, like if you are someone who's been cheated on, I think it's really important to understand that like it's a choice they made. It's not a reflection on you. It might be a reflection on how healthy your relationship is. It might be a reflection on how strong your boundaries are. And it's an opportunity for you to assess things, but don't internalize it, because it is not your responsibility to make sure your partner is faithful to you. If you do get into a committed relationship and your partner and you agree on what the boundaries are of your relationship as far as fidelity goes, it's both of your responsibilities to uphold your end of that. So I don't want people to start getting into this idea of like, well, if I had done something differently, my partner would have stayed faithful or something. That's not a productive road to go down, because at the end of the day, your partner made the choice to be unfaithful, and that's on them. You can assess the situation and look at your life and look at maybe what you feel like you could have done differently, but it's on them. Now, I've mentioned this in other videos before. I mean, I see male and female infidelity as both being wrong. If you step outside the boundaries of your relationship, I think it's equally unacceptable. I do know that there's a lot of messages in the manosphere that it's worse if women do it because women have an emotional connection. It's not as bad if men do it because that's how men are programmed. I don't believe that. I've mentioned this in a lot of other videos before. Stepping outside the boundaries of your relationship for either person is wrong and it's dangerous. I don't buy into the whole manosphere crap that a man can love a woman and also cheat on her for a lot of reasons. Like, for one, like for men particularly, love is an action, it's not a feeling. So if you as a man take an action that only benefits you, especially in the short term, but deliberately hurts your partner, like you know this is going to hurt your partner, you are not acting out of love for your partner. So you cannot love your partner and also cheat on her because you are doing something that you know is going to hurt her, and deliberately hurting your partner when it solely benefits you, especially just for short-term gratification, is absolutely not an act of love. So you cannot love your partner while you are sleeping with somebody else. You can't do that. I mean, it goes both ways, but the argument that gets used is men being able to do that, and that's not the case. I mean, I've also used this argument, and I've said this before many times, that for men, if you were going to be a protector and provider of your family, by actively sleeping with another woman, you are not protecting your family, because for one, you're not protecting your partner like emotionally because you are deliberately doing something that's going to hurt her. You're also not protecting her physically because you're now exposing your body to other women and other things that you could bring back to your partner, which is compromising your health. And if you do have a family, the health of the mother of your children. It's also going to inhibit your chances of providing, because for one thing, if you're sleeping with other women, you are now potentially creating another family. And if you do get another woman pregnant, then your resources are going to be partly taken from your primary family into another family. So it's actually inhibiting your ability to provide for a woman. And again, I'm not saying that it's worse than when women cheat, but I'm saying it's not like men cheating is not a bad thing, because there's a lot of reasons why it's actually very destructive. It's not just like what men do. And to wrap this up, one thing that I did hear Esther Perel say, I think it was an interview, I don't know if it was actually in her book, but this was actually a point that I thought was actually really, really important. For me personally, infidelity, absolute deal breaker. Would not forgive it, would not take the person back, don't care the circumstances, it would be over. However, not the choice everybody would make. And there was a really interesting point that I heard Esther Perel make, that after years and years and years of working with couples and working through infidelity and things like that, there was a very common theme as to the couples who could make a relationship work after infidelity and the couples who couldn't. And the determining factor was if the person who cheated felt remorse for the pain that they put their partner through. Not even necessarily like that they felt bad about actually cheating, but that they felt bad for the pain that they put their partner through. Then they have a chance of it working. If they don't actually feel any remorse for the pain that they put their partner through, the relationship probably won't have any chances of succeeding. And that makes a certain amount of sense because it shows the ability to have empathy for the other person and to actually show love and care for the other person. And if you can't have empathy for another person, you don't actually care about the pain that another person is going through, then there's really no way you're going to be able to have a healthy relationship in general. I mean, and this goes for beyond just infidelity, but in general, like, you need to be having empathy and compassion for another person in order to be in a relationship with someone. And that's universal for men or women. Again, personally, would not forgive infidelity, but there are people out there who may have a different point of view about that. But I do think that it is important to note that if you are dealing with infidelity or you do have a partner who is unfaithful, they need to at least express remorse and feel remorse for the pain that they put you through, even if they feel a justification for why they did what they did. Again, I would find that to be a warning sign personally. But again, they have to at least, at minimum, have remorse for the pain that they put you through. And whether or not you forgive someone who's been unfaithful is your choice. It's your decision. It's not for me to tell you what to do. I personally wouldn't forgive it, but that's my choice. And, you know, your choice is individual. I mean, I'm just scratching the surface, obviously, on the topic of infidelity, but it has been coming up a lot because I think of, you know, the Tom Brady roast and the Tom and Gisele situation, and just finding it ironic that men are looking at a situation of this man that we've put up on a pedestal. I mean, and rightfully so. I think Brady's great. And thinking like, well, he must be immune to this, when women who are put up on pedestals we know aren't immune to it. Somebody just having money or status or beauty or something doesn't automatically make them immune to infidelity. It depends on the character of their partner that they're with, I think, is probably the primary thing. The health of their relationship, the health of both people in the relationship, like their mental health and things. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into it. Obviously, if you have someone who is a narcissist, then, or, you know, a sociopath or something, that's going to change the dynamics as well. Like, I don't want people to think that just because somebody has money, status, beauty, whatever, it makes you immune to it. If we know that people that have these things that we put up on pedestals as being the ideal are still getting cheated on, it's not a reason to say, well, to hell with it, like, you know, why have relationships? Because it doesn't mean that it's going to happen to you. I think it's just a matter of realizing that it can happen to anyone. So all you can do is be the best person that you can be. All you can do is go into a relationship and try to cultivate the best relationship that you can have. You only have so much control over the other person, but hopefully, if the two of you are willing to be in a relationship and work together, hopefully those things won't come up. And if they do, you have to make decisions about how you're going to handle them. I don't want people to live in fear of infidelity. I feel like oftentimes having this information can help people have less fear, because I feel like knowledge is power. And I don't want people to start living in fear of like, oh, we're all just doomed to be, you know, have cheating partners or anything like that. But, you know, the more that you understand infidelity and you also know that it's really not a reflection on you, it's actually a reflection on the other person, I think that can help empower you. I hope this information was helpful. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you have any thoughts on this topic or any other video suggestions, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. If you're interested in connecting your dark feminine energy, I highly suggest you check out the Dark Feminine Energy Guided Journal and all my masterclasses. Details in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.